So we have yet another one of our new segments, Mechanically Speaking, that we need to get into. This time, though, Alex, I have a one for you because
Perfect. Lay it on me.
I'm gonna lay it on you. So this is actually specific to D&D, but that's okay because we usually use it as our example for a lot of things anyway.
Yeah, that's fine.
But this is a system that was always confused me, and one of the reasons probably that I was a little hesitant to run a game because I didn't know how these two things matched up. Challenge ratings and character levels. Okay, so monsters, everything like that, enemies will have challenge ratings associated with them, and then you have character levels. I never really understood, like, I kept thinking to myself, okay, so if I have a challenge rating 4, does that mean that it's right for a party that's at level 4? And if so, how many people?
Okay, so generally, the way I've understood it, and again, I haven't really made my own encounters in a while, there may be people who can tell us better on this one, and that's fine. The way I understood it is a challenge rating, like 4, is rated for a full party of 4 players of that level to take on.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So a CR4 is rated for a 4th level party to be able to handle.
A 4th level party. How many players do they usually assume?
Like 4 players.
That's
like 4 players.
Okay, so it's a 4-player party. Okay.
The issue here is that when you add more monsters to a combat,
okay,
it's not a CR4 and a CR1 and a CR1. You have to go in to calculate what is known as an effective character level, I believe.
Okay.
An ECL. And that has a different way of measuring it, which I would have to look at right now, what it's like. You know, if you have a CR4 monster,
okay,
that's fine, but if you add groups of monsters, it suddenly becomes harder because there's more monsters dealing damage more often, more abilities, a lot more going on. So instead of it being like, alright, these are all like CR1s, but I've got 6 of them. It doesn't necessarily equal a CR6, but the math involved is based on the monsters. So like you might have, let's see if I can find it really quick.
Sure. Because I guess generally I was a little confused because I figured that they must be assuming some amount of people in a party when they were doing that. So essentially, like, if I had the one challenge rating 5, does that mean that it's a party of 5 and also level 5? Like, that feels like it exponentially grows for challenge ratings.
Okay, so there's one thing, for instance, that are encounter builders, Kobold Fight Club, or koboldplus.club, if you're looking at the website, will tell you can be like, alright, I've got 4 players, they're level 1, and it will give you ways you can build this. So you can like search an easy encounter or a medium encounter, for instance, could be like 2 camels and a giant badger.
just 2 camels and a giant badger.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds great.
So like an easy encounter for a 4 players level 1 would be like 8 bats, which are CR0, but it like gives you an example like this.
Got it.
Or noble and a spider, or whatever. So like a hard might be like a poisonous snake and a reef shark. This is just I'm just pushing random.
Sure.
So like, I think one way you can do it is the adjusted XP, how much it's worth. For instance, so if I do like players random hard encounter for level 2, it could be 8 poisonous snakes.
Got it. Okay, 8 poisonous snakes. That sounds fun. Do they all hit me at the same time?
Probably. So it depends on how many players you have and how many monsters you have, for instance. I'm not the best at this, but like for this instance, players for level 2, you could have 1 imp and 1 piercer, which is a CR1 and a CR1 half. So it takes into account like what kind of combat you're running.
Okay.
And then what level your characters and your monsters are.
Okay.
So you can build out the encounter to be like, alright, well, I've got a CR1 and then a couple smaller monsters is generally what you want to do, like an ogre and then some goblins, or an ogre and some orcs, which are like CR1 half.
Okay.
Because if you say use 2 CR4 monsters, suddenly it's a lot more difficult than using. Actually, I think it's more difficult using, say, an ogre and then orcs, like 3 or 4 orcs, than it is using like 2 ogres.
Right.
Because there's only 2 ogres, but there's suddenly an ogre and 6 orcs. That is a vastly different encounter.
Yeah. It sure is.
So it measures it that way.
Okay.
Generally, again, I haven't looked in it in a while, so I apologize for not having the information right in front of me.
Right.
But there are a bunch of things called Fight Club and other ways you can find encounter calculators. So we can go, all right, I want to build an encounter. I'm going to add an orc and then another orc, and it can be like, all right, this is what this encounter is rated for. It'll be either easy, medium, or hard difficulty for players of that level, of that many, to deal with in general.
I see. Okay. So, so my basic takeaway, too, is that I'm going to guess if I have 4 CR, like, quarters, they don't necessarily make a CR1. It's not the same thing.
No, it wouldn't necessarily mean the same thing.
Right. One of those is because now you have 4 monsters instead of 1, and since everything gets like the 1 turn in a round, you have 4 monsters that are acting at the same time as 1. If it was a CR1 monster as opposed to 4 quarter monsters. But because now I'm getting hit 4 times. There was that whole thing people said, like, if you want your party to feel like they're the heroes of the story, give them 1 powerful monster to fight. If you want to make them feel like there's an actual threat, give them a whole lot of small ones.
Yeah, that's the difference between doing that, is if you have 500 goblins or 1 CR like 500 like 20, it's a bit different.
Oh yeah, I could take on the dragon, but I think I'd rather take on the dragon than have the horde of kobolds coming at me, or those badgers with those camels. I found an easier one. This is castark.co.uk. Okay. I'll actually throw it up in the chat. That would be very helpful for me.
Look at later. It's a 5th edition D&D encounter calculator. So right now I have a party of 4. They're character level 2. And on the side I can do, say, let's have 1 monster that is CR2. Is a difficulty of medium, like it'd be normal. The encounter challenge rating is 2 because it is 1 CR2 monster. Now if I have a CR3 monsters that are CR2, it becomes actually I think this is they add up appropriately in this, allegedly.
Oh, good.
So it counts as an encounter challenge rating 6.
Okay.
So it counts as a deadly encounter.
Yeah.
Even if I were to say do it this way. 3 CR2 monsters. 2 still counted deadly. Okay, 2 CR2 monsters still counts as deadly. So generally you're going to use like things that are not quite on the same level as characters to make encounters that are not deadly.
Yeah.
So if I do 1/4, if I have 8 1/4, it is still an encounter challenge rating 3.
Okay.
So if I have a party 4 that are level 3 and I have 8 CR1 quarter monsters, it is still counted as a hard encounter.
Got it. Even though the combined would end up being like a 2. If I have 8 quarter monsters, it doesn't equate to really a 2 challenge rating.
No, it's more because you're outnumbering the party by.
You're exponentially doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say I have an example. Let's do like a through a mirror darkly kind of way. Let's imagine that you end up with the evil party. Basically, it's your party but with a mustache. Right? It's the evil party. Your party but with a mustache. And
sure.
So how would I figure out what I wanted to do for a challenge rating if I have the same number of characters, essentially, and they're supposed to be right around the same power up
So
against
if you were
one
to say, okay, so if you were to do 4 characters at level 3 versus 4 monsters of CR3, which you're equating as roughly, that still counts as a deadly encounter.
Yeah.
The difference here is that this is not generally equating a monster challenge rating to a player level.
Got it.
Most monsters do not have character levels.
Mm-hmm.
Or player, or, they don't have levels, generally speaking.
Sure.
So, if you start giving a monster levels,
Mm-hmm.
you're accounting... first of all, if you're using a monster that has a challenge rating, and then giving it levels, I think what you're doing is going, alright, it's got a CR of 2, and then suddenly I'm giving it 3 player levels, which becomes an encounter level 5 creature.
Oh, okay.
I think is how it worked. That's how it worked in, I think, 3.5. 5e might be different, but suddenly you're making this a lot harder to deal with.
Sure.
Which is why you don't generally give low-level monsters levels unless you're trying to make them tougher. So you just add more of them, for instance. But if you're doing, like, players that don't have a challenge rating, like you're doing a Dragonborn, that's level 4,
Mm-hmm.
I think you can kind of almost do point for point. If you have 4 of you and there's 4 of them, I would consider that a hard encounter, probably.
Sure. Sure.
Since you're still equating the same number with the same abilities.
I see.
So it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, would it be easier to... And I guess this is one of the things that I wondered about this, is that why not just have the monsters have levels? Like I can see, like, if you had the evil party, right? Like, you could probably just make character sheets for them, and you could say that they were essentially the same level in general. You might not need to have a challenge rating for them, but it starts to make me wonder why you would want to have, like, a challenge rating system instead of just having the same kind of leveling system to determine power as the party itself.
I'm not really sure. Honestly, it's similar but different.
Got it.
And obviously there are ways you can use XP builds to be like, alright, this XP is going to be worth 200 XP, what can I do to add monsters in to do that?
Yeah.
I think the difference between, like, levels is saying that you could level up a monster, for instance.
Right.
So in that case, you might need, like, alright, these are goblins ranging from a quarter CR or an eighth CR up to CR 4 or level 4.
Got it. Okay.
Levels don't equate for having the challenge rating 1/4, for instance.
Sure. Okay.
You can't really have a quarter of a level.
Right. I understand that, and I always figured that it would be a little bit tricky, like, a three-person party as opposed to a 4-person party. How that's going to, like, that might make a CR that's really difficult as a CR that's not. But I can see the one possibility is that, like, kind of like you were saying, is that idea about the levels. We could level those characters up, but obviously a level 5 rat is still not going to be particularly powerful. Maybe the reason why they decided to use challenge ratings is because it tries to keep it in perspective to the whole deal around the world. Like, a level 5 rat and a level 5 dragon still aren't going to be on the same par. So so you're not going to be able to equate those two in the same way. Like, player levels, that's a whole different thing. You can kind of see how your character is being built out and see what you get at each level. But I can kind of understand maybe the monsters, it's just not going to work that way because the levels are completely arbitrary. You're not going to end up with the same thing. But you could scale them up and down, I suppose, if you really needed to. But that would be more of a homebrew thing.
Yeah.
Which
is fine to do sometimes.
Certainly. So I guess the takeaway here is, if you're having trouble figuring out how to do challenge ratings versus the player levels, you need to go get a challenge rating calculator.
Yeah, just go to get an encounter calculator if you're not sure.
And just have the machine do it for you, because it is not quite as simple as, 2 + 2 = 4. It doesn't really equate that way.
Right. So if anyone in the comments or wants to talk on Discord, let us know like ways you build encounters to make them more balanced or to take them and rebalance them. Do you use encounter calculators, or do you just know the math better than we do?
Yeah, do you know the do you know the algorithm behind this? Because
Yeah.
if so, it's not like easily known, and it might have changed a lot since I know you're used to 3.5 more than 5, but they still use challenge ratings back in 3.5, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it is possible that it's changed a little bit, but it was always, as a newer player, a sticking point for me. Every time somebody would be like, oh yeah, well that's a challenge rating 3 monster, I have absolutely no idea what the relationship is.
Right.
And it's going to depend a lot on your party, what they're capable of, what their level is, how many of you there are, and et cetera, et cetera. But,
Etc.
and so there you go. So so does that mean that we have mechanically spoken? I can do
We
that?
have spoken mechanically.
Perfect. Excellent.
Perfect.
Great. We are now challenge rating 3. We were up from challenge rating 2. We are 3 rats in a trench coat. We used to be 2. That's even better.